Hello, everybody. Jason Haas here for the semi-weekly Tablas Creek Instagram live broadcast. My guest this week is Rob McMillan, who is the head of the Silicon Valley Bank wine division and has been for what, 2 decades plus at this point. And I have so much that I want to talk to him about, from obviously what's been going on recently at Silicon Valley Bank and how they've emerged out the other side, but also more generally about how he thinks about what's going on in wine, larger trends. He's probably the foremost collector of data about wine in working today. So I can't wait to talk to Rob, but while we wait for people to join, as I always do, I'm going to share a few pictures to share what's going on at the winery. So I'm going to start with a little overview of what it has looked like for the last week or 10 days. It has been kind of this like June gloom, which we don't really get up here in this part of Paso. So it's been unusually foggy. We haven't had a ton of sun. It's actually sunny right now, but this is the first sunny day we've had in a little while. But that just means that things have not accelerated to the degree that they normally would have. The vineyard is still just at the very earliest stages of flowering. This was a Grenache cluster that I found today that has flowering at the top of a hill. If you're not one of the early grapes like Grenache or Viognier, Grenache Blanc, Vermentino, you're not flowering no matter where you are. And even with those early varieties, unless you're at the top of the hill, you don't see any flowering. So we're not really worried about the impact of this cool weather at this stage. It just seems in keeping with the sort of throwback character of the year. A couple other quick pictures just to give you a sense of what everything else looks like right now. A few variety by variety on what we call Scruffy Hill. So start with Grenache. You can see it's looking kind of bushy and vigorous the way that it always does. I'll show you Syrah next. We can trellis this higher. It's about a 6 foot high head trained vine. Still pretty vigorous and looking on the early side. Counoise next. This is a smaller vine, less far out. The Counoise clusters are still tiny, flower clusters, barely even identify the individual berries. And then finally, the last of our 4 major red varieties, Mourvedre, which is looking like it usually does this time of year. Sturdy, healthy. It starts to struggle later in the growing season, but right now Mourvedre in the early season always looks pretty good. A couple other things just to share. I thought it was interesting to look at the contrast between Grenache, which is on the right, the bushier, taller vines, and Mourvedre, which is on the left. This will hold true the whole growing season. Grenache is just a more vigorous grape variety. But if you hear people talk about vigor in grapevines, this is a great example of what that looks like. And then what we're doing in a lot of the rest of the vineyard is going in and making sure that things are mowed so we don't end up with weeds tangled in amongst the grapevines, and then some shoot thinning so that we kind of regularize the number of clusters per vine and make sure that we can get good flow of light and air through the canopy. So that's it for Vineyard. One last shout out. Congratulations to our winemaker, Neil Collins, who became a grandfather for the 2nd time, and his son, Jordan, and his daughter-in-law, Amanda, who also works here in the cellar at Tablas Creek. So Amanda and Jordan had a baby girl yesterday. So congratulations to them. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I am going to invite Rob to join. That request, and hopefully we will see this pop up momentarily. Hey, how you doing, Rob? I think the camera's pointing the wrong way.
Is it? Well, let me see if I can fix it.
I see a very nice umbrella, but not you. There we go.
That happened last time too.
Excellent.
Take these out of my ear.
Cool. Looks like it looks like it's pointed a little low. If you can point it up, we can, because I'm sort of cut off in the middle of your eyes. There we go.
How's that?
Excellent. That's great. Well,
All right.
thank you for joining me. It looks lovely where you are. Are you up in Napa?
Yeah, I'm in my backyard.
Beautiful. Have you had the same kind of like cool overcast spring as we have down here?
It just got sunny the second. Yeah, I mean, last week was nice. It was warm. Started pressing up toward 80. This week it's been low 70s, and sometimes you go all the way through. They say June gloom, but it's been May gloom. The fog's been early up here.
May gray. That's the in Santa Barbara. That's the May gray, and it goes into June gloom.
Yeah.
There's nothing that rhymes with Paso Robles that has to do with any of that, but we've been seeing it here too. Okay, so I have a lot of writers who join me, and I want to talk about your writing. But I like to start by asking writers, like, which came first, the writing or the wine? So for you, which came first, the interest in banking, or the interest in wine?
Oh, definitely banking. When I wrote the business plan for the state of the industry, or pardon me, for the wine group, I drank wine, Zinfandel, and 7-Up, and I was more of a Scotch drinker.
Um, and how much has that changed?
Well, it's probably about a bottle a night, so there's no room for Scotch.
Cool. Okay, so I want to start where I'm sure a lot of people are probably wondering with sort of current events. Can you talk about sort of where things are now with the Silicon Valley Bank wine division? Because I think there's people probably remember early March and remember hearing about all of the crisis with Silicon Valley Bank being taken over, but they may not know where things have landed.
Yeah, it's the quick update, just so people hear hear what happened. We had a treasury problem. This wasn't a loan problem. This wasn't an operating problem. Everything was going fine from that standpoint. As a matter of fact, the bank had all the right capital ratios. There was nothing that was out of line from that standpoint. There was some regulatory things they were facing, but this was a surprise to a lot of people, and you can't really predict a bank run. Sadly, I wished I could, because that was where all my savings was, and so that hurt. We went through a period of a couple of weeks. I looked around to see if we could find other banks that would buy just the wine division, and the reason I did that is I was afraid of, and it was likely, we're the 14th largest bank. I was maybe like Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan Chase would have bought us, and then we would just lose our identity. We would just instantly change our name, and I fully expected, by the way, to change our name. I asked for a couple of weeks from all of our employees before they went out and started to look for new jobs. It was certainly a difficult time, but they gave me those couple of weeks, and then First Citizens Bank bought us, who I'd never heard of, by the way. At the time, they were the 30th largest bank. Now you stick the two together, and we're combined 20th. And it turns out that they're a pretty good owner. We're still Silicon Valley Bank. They decided to run us as a division. They said they don't know what we do, but we do, so keep doing it. And so we still have the same credit administrators, same processes, same everything. Now, who knows? Over time, that may change. But they bought CIT, which is a very large leasing company, may still be the largest in the United States. They bought CIT, I think, 4 years ago, and they're still called CIT. And talked to the guys over there, and they're still running. Said they let them do what they want. So that's a pretty good owner. And I've met the senior people in the bank, and they're pragmatic. I like them. And so I think the best news, that's the best news, but the really cool news for me is that I met with probably 24 different financial institutions in that 2-week period of time when we were owned by the FDIC. And in that period of time, nobody left. And we ended up, when all is said and done, to this day, we have 100% of our clients, 100% of our employees, and we've actually grown by about 10%, if that makes any sense to you at all. We're Silicon Valley Bank. We're just Silicon Valley Bank doing the same thing in the same chairs that we did before. So, it was about 60 days of pain, and, my pocketbook's sore, but otherwise, it's going much better than I deserve.
So that 10% growth, that feels like maybe no publicity is bad publicity kind of thing. You think people learned about Silicon Valley Bank and its involvement in wine that never would have known otherwise?
No. it has more to do with the change in banking altogether. And so what I've experienced over time is when we go through difficulty in the banking sector, and this is not just Silicon Valley Bank, this is, First Republic and other banks that have had to deal with increasing, Fed pricing. And my experience has been that we do better in markets that maybe are treading a little toward the troublesome because we know what we're doing. And people at that point, they say, well, maybe we need to be with somebody that actually understands this business if we're going to go through a difficult period. So I think that's what it is, really.
Great. So let's talk about the state of the industry report that I think, other than the wineries that are actually your clients, that's probably the interface that most people in the wine community have with your work, or at least the first one. How did that get started, and what made you want to do it?
When I started the business practice, I promised the board of directors I'd give them regular updates, and I discovered really quickly, this is back in 1994, that getting information about the small end, the premium end of the market was really difficult. So, I quickly started a survey, using all of the technology of that era, which was a fax machine, because people didn't all have emails back then. So I used, a fax machine. Everybody had a fax, and, tallied a bunch of survey results and sent it off to the board. And then I looked at it and I said, actually, this is pretty good information. And so I sent it around to everybody that answered the survey too. And I just got these, oh my God, how did you get this? This is amazing. And it was like, it wasn't that hard. But that's when I figured out, I really do have something, because you could, anytime in this past 30 years or so that I've been in this business, you could find stuff on vineyards and you could find stuff from the very large producers, but you really couldn't find anything from the small ones. And so that kind of became my mantra. I just wanted to start putting out something that would help the industry, which is really the larger part by number of the business. You got the top 25, which are maybe 75% of the industry, and then everybody else, which is, by some accounts, 11,000 wineries that need this kind of data. So anyway, that's how it started.
And I think it's amazing that you do this. You provide this data for free, and the analysis and all of that work. Was that a tough sell either to the bosses originally, or to continue to do it with the new management at First Citizens?
Well, what happened was after about 10 years, leading the division, I got to tell you, management isn't a lot of fun. Doing reviews and all that stuff, I'm just not a big fan of it. I love helping people grow. I love helping, anybody that wants to come to me, but I just don't want to be the enforcer. And fortunately, after we got the whole business model installed, with long-term debt and everything else, they allowed me to step into a different role, which is what I do today. So that wasn't hard at all. Somebody else needed to step into my role of doing the management component. And so that was pretty simple. With this one, it's been interesting because First Citizens doesn't have anybody like me. They actually, preferred to stay under the radar with media, and I'm way out in the media. And so the senior executives actually said to me, "Do you think you could teach the rest of us how to do this?" I'm not kidding. And I said, "Well, sure. How much is it going to cost?" That's the real question. How much of a raise do you want to give me? So I think that they're liking the way things are going too.
Great. So I've always valued your kind of openness, like lay the cards on the table and share what's going on, that you do on your blog, which is where I mostly see it. I feel like that really was obvious in the way that you were being very straightforward about what the challenges were during that crisis period when the bank had been taken over and you were looking for a buyer. Is writing something that you've always enjoyed doing, or is it for you more of a means to an end?
I think it's been more therapy for me generally. So at least on the blogging side, it was, as I was processing things and putting ideas together, I mean, my very first blog was actually about ping pong diplomacy, Richard Nixon making his trip to China, and opening up that communication. I don't even remember exactly why I wrote it, but it was actually incredibly successful. I wrote it on a Friday night, and Monday morning I had like 400 reads, and I didn't do anything with it, so I was really shocked. But it's been more, I think, kind of a mixture between therapy and then when I find something really interesting, and I think people ought to see it, then I throw it out there as well. But the writing thing, my roommate from college is amazed that I actually write like I do. He actually asked me, he says, "You were such a shitty student. I mean, your grammar and your spelling were horrible. How can you end up being a writer?" And I said, "Well, spell check and grammar check." That's it.
Well, okay, but I mean, you also always have things to say and things to share. I think the rest of it is details. You can figure out style, you can figure out correctness, but the thing I think which separates a blog that I actually want to read from the other ones that are out there, are that like you always have something that either a perspective or a bit of data or something that I haven't thought of before, haven't thought of in that way. And I think that comes through. It's like the ideas that you're having are ideas that are always that are worth sharing, worth other people taking the time to read. So with the survey, I know the most recent direct-to-consumer survey was a struggle to get enough wineries to participate. I feel like there's an annual thing of getting wineries to participate in this resource that will end up doing them a ton of good. Does it get old having to plead with wineries to do something which is in their best interests?
Yeah, it gets really old, and this time trying to figure out why people won't participate is if I could figure out exactly the reasons, then maybe I could find a solution to it. But over time, I think people, if I had to point, I'd say that people get tired of surveys. They're just surveyed out. Today, there is competing information. Wine Business Monthly does a survey as well. Community Benchmark does some excellent work with survey data. What we do though is not really an overlap with either of them. We ask very different questions, and we have a trended component of the data that go out a very long time. So it gives us chances to see what's happening over a longer period of times and give people a sense of that. But this time in particular, we had more than one. I'm going to say a dozen people say, "I thought you were out of business." And so I think that probably played a little bit into it too. I'm hoping that's it. But the end of the story is, although we got 200 less responses than our normal minimum, we at least got statistically significant results from all the major AVAs. Now, if we can't get that kind of response, at least going forward, then we'll stop, because that tells me that the industry doesn't want the information.
Yeah, I mean, there's always, with surveys like that, there's the kind of free rider problem where people feel like they can get the benefit from the analysis without actually having to do the work to submit their data. But I think you're right in analyzing that at least part of what's different between past years and this year. I know when I shared it to the various like wine business, winery groups that I'm a part of, I got comments on all of them. It's like, oh wait, they're still doing that? Like I thought that they'd gotten taken over.
Well, and we were going to actually send the survey out the week that we were taken over by the FDIC. So it was scheduled to go out that week, or pardon me, the very next week, where we were owned by the FDIC. So there was no way that was going out. I made a very public statement that I didn't think we'd be able to do it. It's in the blog. I didn't think we'd be able to do it unless we got picked up by another bank in short order. And given our circumstance of retaining all of our employees, which many helped with the report, everybody said, including our marketing group, let's do it. And I said, okay. So, it's a little bit further on in the season than they're used to as well. And we used to partner with Wine Business Monthly on this survey. They elected to go do it, their own survey, which is great. We still love them. But their survey was also out at the same time, which I think probably adds to confusion as well.
Right. Yeah, I hope it's a blip. Um, I think you're right that there's a certain everybody heard about the collapse, but not everybody heard about the kind of resuscitation.
Yeah, we're fine, believe it or not. It just, I keep saying whenever I'm talking or writing, I say, believe it or not, we're better off than we were before. Before I'm not personally wealth-wise, but the bank and our client base, I think, is going to be much better off. Not much. We'll be better off than we were probably before, and we are right now. So that's quite amazing to me. And it's like it sounds like bullshit, honestly. It's like, oh, you just fluffing it up, and I'm not. It's just I think we're better off.
Sounds like a miracle. It's great.
It is.
Um, okay, so if you had to sort of summarize what the state is of the wine industry now in whatever, in just in a short couple sentences, how would you summarize it?
I would say we're entering a soft period. People accuse me of doom and gloom, but I think that at this point, for the very first time, I think people are seeing what I've been saying for at least the last 7 years, that we're not appealing enough to the young population versus the older population in order to offset that change. We have an older population that likes wine better than everything else, and everything below 60 that kind of balances it out. And so that doesn't mean disaster; it means softness in sales. And fortunately for the premium side, it's fine. I'm seeing a lot of discussion right now, good data of lower visitation rates. In the premium segment, obviously. And a lot of concern about that. And I'm not really as concerned about that. I think that what we're really looking at is another, vibration, if you will, off of the opening of COVID, where everybody decided to kind of go to Europe and go have all of their weddings and all the other things that have been delayed. I think that's what we're really looking at, and I don't think we've hit normal yet. Maybe next year I think we'll hit more normal than that, and we'll probably end up stabilizing visitation numbers too, I think.
Yeah, I just did a deep dive into our own numbers here at Tablas Creek over the first part of the year. And I think you're totally right. We're basically still in kind of the tide washing out after like the big high tide of everybody coming out of the COVID lockdowns and spending tons of time going to wine country because wine country felt like a safe destination when getting on a plane and doing the cruise or doing that Hawaii or Europe vacation didn't feel safe. And now you've got at the high end people taking that kind of delayed gratification of these extravagant trips, and on the kind of middle end you've got a combination of worries about inflation and expenses sort of chewing away at the more modest end of wine lovers. And I feel like that's kind of the echo of the boom and bust that we saw during COVID. So I'm happy to hear you think the same thing.
Yeah, and probably one more point worth noting is that when we went into 2021, there was $3 trillion in pent-up savings. And that pent-up savings starts to eat away from the lower in the economic continuum, if you will, first. The people that don't really have it are the ones that use it first,
Right.
and then it starts to go up. Right now it's starting to enter that period where it's affecting more of the higher wealth folks as well. So, I mean, that could play a little bit into it. Fear of a recession, maybe from the standpoint of you want to prepare for it, but I think it's just an echo. That's my belief.
Cool. So I feel like back to the sort of worries about demographics. I feel like you've been sounding the alarm about wine's inability to connect with younger, particularly millennial demographics for a while. Do you feel like this is something that individual wineries can move the needle on, or do you think it needs sort of an industry-wide response?
Well, I mean, the first thing, in order to fix any problem, you have to recognize there's a problem, and the industry, many people have been fighting me on the whole notion of it. This last year, I kind of threw every single data point I could see in the first 6 slides of the report, showing it, every single piece of data said the same thing, and I didn't see how anybody could refute what it said. And I think this year, as I'm looking through what's going on in the market, what's going on in conventions and those kind of things, surveys, across the board, now it's starting to become recognized that, yeah, this is where we are. Um, for me, that means I don't think I need to talk about that much anymore. And so to your question, yeah, it really does need to be on the winery itself. I tried to, with 3 other analysts, start USDA marketing order. We raised $1 million to pull that off, and then we had a large winery who will go unnamed kind of torpedoed the whole thing. And I do understand in the background there's some consideration being given to doing that. Me and the 3 analysts did that gratis, just over 2 years of hard work. We did it for free, so none of us are excited about jumping back into it. But we hope that somebody does, and that would be an industry thing if that's possible. But yeah, otherwise it's got to be on every single winery. You've got to think about all of your marketing. How you're speaking to your consumer. Do you have people in your tasting room that represent your demographic? Are people, as I used to say, we need people that cuss more in tasting rooms and have gauges in their ears and tattoos down, a sleeve down there instead of a sleeve like this, tattoos that speak that same language. And that's just a small sample of it. But it's really adapting what I think is our product and all the natural characteristics of it to that new consumer. And I personally believe that wine is the product that everybody wants from a value standpoint in the under 60 category. It's just we haven't done a good enough job of telling them that it is natural.
Yeah,
For instance.
I remember I think it was a podcast that you were on where you kind of were incredulous that seltzer is currently doing a better job. Hard seltzer is currently doing a better job at promoting itself as like this cleaner or healthier sort of alcohol, whereas wine, where like it's fruits generally made in a very low intervention sort of way, like that should be a natural for that, but it has not yet managed to really take on that mantle.
Yeah, and honestly, pot has really been more green in the way it's marketed itself. It's a natural product. Of course it is. Well, so are grapes, by the way.
Right.
But yeah, marijuana is considered more healthy in a lot of family rooms than a glass of wine with dinner, which that boggles my mind. Because I know what wine is and I know what it's not. It's not the way the premium side does it. It's not loaded with chemicals. You do know the source of your food. Everybody wants to know, where did my food come from? How many ingredients are in it? All that kind of stuff. And that's what wine is. It's not spiked seltzer.
Do you feel like, I mean, there is a push which is already happening in Europe and which I think is coming here in fairly short order towards requiring ingredient labeling and nutritional information on wine. Do you feel like that will, I know that the wine industry has been resistant to it for a bunch of different
Yeah.
reasons, some good, some bad, I think, but do you feel like that will help in the long run?
I think it'll help. Now, if you look at data from the Wine Market Council, they came up with something this last year that said that people really didn't care that much about it, but they were actually interviewing wine consumers, right? So those consumers have already gotten over the fact that the ingredients they know what's in it, and they're still fine with buying it. But I think if you start to really get down into the data and get more of the non drinkers in that mix, you're going to find that ingredients probably are marginally more important than to current drinkers. Current drinkers have already come to grips with it, but we're trying to attract drinkers. That's the point.
Do you have Do you have any examples of any wineries that you think are doing a particularly good job at kind of breaking out of that the box of mostly doing old-fashioned marketing to boomers that are you think are examples that the rest of us should be looking to for marketing better to newer demographics?
Well, it's all over the board, and I do see more trial. So I can't say that there's one winery in specifically you ought to follow, but Chateau Saint Michel, started working on labeling some of their white wines, which I thought was a good start. You see, other wineries, starting to try to maybe make a run at some lower alcoholized wines, which is, I think, particularly difficult for wine in itself to really lower alcohol without a hose that you forgot to let run in the tank. So that might be a little more difficult, but across the board, people are trying. We got the naturalist movement, no intervention type thing. We haven't really spent much time on talking about how a lot of the premium side has been doing biodynamic and sustainable farming for a very long time, but it never hits the label. Just one more oddity to me.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the way that the organic regulations in the United States tie up sulfite-free and organic, which is different than the way that it's done in the rest of the world, has, I think, been a huge disservice to organic farming in wine, and has paradoxically really discouraged people from moving to organic, because if they talk about it, you have to then forego sulfites, which has a whole cascade of problems.
Yeah.
I've written about this. It's a source of a great amount of frustration.
I remember back in the 90s. I remember walking into Trader Joe's, which had a few organic wines made, and corks blowing off. It's because it didn't have sulfites in it. So going through secondary fermentation.
I mean, I do think that we've gotten past that. I know this year we put the CCOF organic seal on our estate wines for the first time, along with the regenerative organic seal. I hope that we're moving past the memories of that. I mean, we're at least betting that we have moved far enough past it.
Because again, we're talking about my generation, the boomers, which the median boomer age is 66, and so that whole generation is moving on. The memories that go back into the 70s and 80s and 90s don't really influence sales today.
So on LinkedIn, when you shared the news of this conversation, you promised that you would share when the recession was going to start. So I'm not thrilled to hear that you say the recession with such confidence. What are your thoughts?
I don't think it's coming. I'm one of those who look at the unemployment rate, which is kind of hovering around record lows, and it's hard for me to think that we can have a true recession with those kind of data points. I think the Fed, especially right now, is a little bit nervous about raising, and they're starting to see the problems with raising interest rates. I hear about certain funds that are out, FUNDS, that are out there, ag funds, et cetera, that are now starting to leverage their own unleveraged prior real estate. And that tells me there's liquidity issues there, but they're solvable versus what Silicon Valley Bank had. So I don't think the Fed's really interested in raising rates this next round. And I think you also have to recognize that this is by far the most anticipated recession in the history of man. So the U.S. economy is still doing well. I don't see anything really stopping that right now. If inflation really flipped around and really took off again, then I think we'd have difficulties because we'd have to raise rates. But I'm one of the people that still say I don't think we're going to have a recession.
Great. It's great to hear. So you think the Fed will actually manage to land its soft landing that they've been trying to do?
We'll hope. I mean, a recession, there's a bunch of different definitions of it, but traditionally it's been more, more than 2 quarters of negative GDP. And we're still in pretty positive territory, so we'll see if we'll actually be able to get down to the We may end up with a negative quarter, but I still don't think it's recession.
And it feels like you said. I mean, what's the unemployment rate? Like 3.5%. Like
It's low.
like historically tiny, which would be a very weird feeling recession to have those happen at the same time.
Yeah, for me, it feels like a Great Depression, given the impacts I've had on my savings. But when I look at the world around us, it doesn't look that bad.
Okay, so last question. So if there were one thing that you think that wineries should do to that would benefit themselves, but also benefit the greater industry in terms of attracting new customers or communicating better with the customers who they have but maybe aren't super wine loyal, what would that be?
Well, I would say look at the annual report. There's a nice little chart with the different values between boomers and people younger than boomers. I'm not saying millennials versus boomers. I'm just saying people younger than 60s and
of Gen X, which always gets left out of these comparisons. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and although there's Gen X has got some boomer characteristics as well, the reality is the time has passed now to sell to me unless you're selling, I don't know, some aged products or whatever, mausoleums, I don't know. But you just go down that list in terms of values. What do people value? And so for me personally, we have a choice. We can either lower price or we can increase value. Now, I'm not talking about increased quality, because I think the quality of wines that we make have never been better. And I don't think it serves anybody to lower price. I think that's just a downward spiral. And if we get to that point, it could be messy. So we have to talk about the things that people value to increase value. And I think that they're already there. So it's going down that list, and it's going down the things you do to present your brand and present what you mean to your consumer base, and who you want to attract, and make sure that you're doing everything that you can to start to change the message a little bit. It doesn't have to be overnight, but you have to make directional improvement. That's what I think people need to do. You've got to show directional improvement, and I think people finally get that what I've been saying for the last 7 years or so is now we're in it. So okay, we've identified the problem, so let's go about fixing it.
And I think one of the things that at least I try to think about as we're marketing Tablas Creek is that, like, we know that, and this isn't exclusively the province of millennials or younger wine consumers, but people more and more, they want to know that the products that they're buying, particularly the products that they're consuming, are being made in a way that has a positive impact on the world, or is at least in alignment with their own personal values. So it feels like the move towards more and more organic farming, less interventionist winemaking, better use of packaging, like all of these things are stories that wine can tell authentically and honestly that would really help. And yet it's still, I think there are a lot of wineries, maybe because they are owned or run by older owners or managers, who are still talking about the mystique of wine and the luxury of wine, and feel like
long days and cool nights.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I always say. But here's the thing: is that it's really hard to make a change when things are going well. And for the premium side of the data that we have, using financial data, which is our clients and prospects together, when we can throw it all together. And sales growth last year for the premium section, the fine wine section, was like 10%.
Right.
So it's really easy to just say, it's working. Why do we want to change that? We have other problems. We need a new basket press. It's easier to say things like that than actually thinking about sales, I think.
So do you think it's up to the less expensive end of the wine spectrum to do that outreach to the younger wine drinker?
I don't think there's a choice. They've historically been the gateway. I see what, Constellation, Gallo, others are doing now in actually attacking more of the spirits category. They're going, or you look at Constellation, they went with the cannabis category a little early, in my opinion. And I said it way back when. And so maybe that was early. That hasn't been their best investment, but everybody's looking for growth, and the larger category players, that are producing by volume, are struggling. So they have a fixed overhead that's got to be covered, and you can't cover that by making liquor. You've got to make wine out of it, and so it's to your advantage to find ways to actually connect with that young consumer by any means possible. And so, we'll see. But we're finally hitting this negative growth period, and I think we'll see change.
Great. Okay. Well, I can't believe that it has been half an hour. We actually went a little bit over. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing your own journey and your own thoughts and your own experience. And thank you for all of the work that you do, trying to put what's going on in the world of wine in context for all of us, and have been doing for decades.
Yeah.
If people want to follow you or learn more about your work, what's the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn is where I am mostly on social. I'm getting a little bit back more into Instagram. I'm totally off of Facebook now. But my blog, SVB on Wine, that's a good place to find me. My email's on that blog. You could email me if you want. My phone numbers are in there too. So I'm always willing to connect with almost anybody at any point, as long as it's not a dumb question. And as they say, there's no dumb questions. But I gave a speech once where this person in the front row, and it was about 30 people, this new couple was in it. She says, "I'm sorry to take so much of your time and ask all these questions. Can I ask another one?" And I said, "Well, they say there's no such thing as a dumb question." I said, "Except when I asked my ex-wife to marry me." So I'll take about any question, except there are some dumb ones.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for taking this time out of your Wednesday to talk with me, and congratulations on having navigated the challenges of that initial collapse and takeover of Silicon Valley Bank. I'm thrilled that the division is healthy and doing well, and that we all benefit from your experience and expertise and willingness to dive into the details. So,
and thanks for being, Jason, a help in the marketing network that gets out there and talks about the industry. We're trying to have a conversation. It takes other people like you to get out there and do things like this. It's important.
My pleasure. Excellent. Well, thank you again. Thank you, Rob McMillan, for joining me, and thank you everybody at Tablas Creek, and Rob's followers who have watched today. I'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Take care.
Bye.